What if I told you that for centuries? Whole navies ran on secrets, quiet arrangements, special friendships, and vows whispered over rum barrels because loneliness on the open sea made its own laws. Welcome aboard, where the ocean was endless. Privacy was a myth, and the phrase cabin boys and companionships no one spoke of wasn't a rumor. It was the glue that kept a lot of crews from flying apart. We're talking about coded rituals, hush-hush alliances, and a shadow history of intimacy at sea, a secret same-sex relationship shaped by danger, boredom, and the very real need to trust the person sleeping an elbow's length away. This matters because it shows how power and desire get weird when society says don't, but the environment says you will, and because the myths we inherit about honorable sailors conveniently skip the messier truths. If that sounds like a history class that ends with group therapy, hit subscribe. I make videos where the footnotes are dark, the jokes are inappropriate, and you learn things you can't unlearn. Bring snacks, maybe a life vest for your morals. Number 12. Saltwater weddings. Picture this: you're months from land. The ship is a wooden prison with nice views, and the crew is a chaotic family you didn't choose. Now add the daily math of survival. You need someone who will share rations when storms ruin the biscuit, someone who will watch your back when the night watch gets sloppy, someone who will stitch you up when the surgeon's drunk or dead. Enter the saltwater wedding, the rumor-laden, wink-wink companion bond that some sailors formed part romance, part economic partnership, part don't die on me. No church bells, just quiet promises traded like contraband. The terms split the loot, share the hammock, protect each other in fights, and most crucially, belong to someone in a world that insists you shouldn't belong to anyone. You could call it Matelotage, buddying, or being spoke for. The label changed with the flag, but the logic stayed when the mast snapped and the captain pretended it was fine. Your partner didn't. Food got scarce. 2 mouths, 1 plan. Discipline got ugly. 2 fists, 1 story. And if feelings showed up uninvited, well, either you pretended not to notice, or you carved initials into the inside of a sea chest and hoped the waves kept the secret. The irony is perfect. The Navy that policed bodies also depended on a bond it pretended didn't exist. Basically, HR by hammock, no paperwork. All consequences. Number 11. Codes, knots, and cover stories. Ships loved rules. There were articles for everything: stealing, fighting, singing too loud near the captain's cabin. But the stricter the code, the slipperier the loopholes. So companionships hid in plain sight. You shared tobacco and razor blades like love letters. You timed your chores to match someone else's rope work. You traded watches so your blankets overlapped by an hour, and called it efficiency. The quartermaster looked the other way because 2 sailors who were invested in each other made fewer mistakes when the cannons roared. On deck, the language was camouflage. He's my mate could mean we split grog and laundry, or if you hurt him, I become a storm. An extra stitch on a cap, a knot tied the wrong right way, tiny signals in a world where everything is inventory. And there were decoys, loud insults to confuse the bored gossipers, carefully staged poker grudges to explain why the same 2 men never seemed to owe each other money. Meanwhile, the ship's cats knew exactly which blanket was 2 bodies thick. Punishments were brutal on paper, but the sea was pragmatic. If your gunners were fast because they trusted each other with their lives and secrets, the captain had a miracle. He didn't want to interrogate too closely. So the ledger said discipline. The deck said do what works. And the heart said shut up about it. In other words, maritime minimalism: keep the sails full, the lies simple, and your partner closer than your belt knife. Number 10. The cabin boy problem. Let's talk about the thing. Everyone side-eyes, and nobody wants to glamorize power. Crew hierarchies weren't just about who swabbed and who commanded. They shaped who got protected, who got pressured, and who had real choices. Cabin boy sounds like a cute job title, until you remember ships were workplaces with storms for ceilings. Many were adolescents doing dangerous labor in a system that blurred mentorship and dependency. The line between "I'll look out for you and you owe me" could turn toxic fast. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Secrecy doesn't only protect lovers, it can also shelter abuse. Some companionships were tender, mutual lifelines. Others were arrangements welded onto rank, ration control, or fear of isolation. The same structures that let two adults shield each other also let predatory men hide behind routine. He's under my supervision. He shares my berth for safety. Don't meddle in a petty matter. And because sailors were expected to be hard as oak, those without power often had nowhere to complain except the ocean, which is famously bad at paperwork. So what did resistance look like? Whisper networks, disruptive pranks that made a bully look incompetent, collective protection, where older deckhands adopted a kid to neutralize a petty tyrant. Sometimes the crew fixed what the law wouldn't, a quiet transfer of duties, a not-so-accidental rope burn that sent a warning, a barracks shuffle that broke a bad dynamic. The morale isn't that sea love, whilst bad. It's that secrecy is a multi-tool. It cuts bonds, and it cuts people. The only constant was risk of exposure, of punishment, or of letting silence do damage. If medieval marriage was Tinder with parental swiping, life at sea was Tinder in airplane mode. Proximity decides, and the exit door is 3 miles of water straight down. Number 9, Matelotage, but make it legal-ish. Imagine a partnership that wasn't a marriage, wasn't exactly a contract, but did involve pooled income, shared gear, and occasionally a joint retirement plan that looked like buy a tiny tavern and tell tall tales forever. That's Matelotage, the semi-formal sailor bond that shows up in scattered records like a ghost leaving fingerprints. The rules weren't carved on the mast, but everyone sort of knew them. You split plunder. You share a sea chest. You divide the rum ration in a way only one person can complain about, and it's not the quartermaster. If one of you disappeared over the gunwale, the other inherited the knife, the wages, and the duty to tell the good version of the story back home. It sounds romantic, because danger makes everything dramatic, but the economics mattered even more than the feelings. 2 partners could survive lean weeks better than one loner hoarding biscuits. They could invest in a better hammock, a warmer coat, a spare set of boots, the difference between miserable and frostbitten. When ports flirted with prosecution for unnatural acts, the workaround was paperwork's favorite word property. If a bond could be framed as asset-sharing tools, clothes, prize money, suddenly it looked like prudence, not passion. The ship didn't run on heteronormativity. It ran on spreadsheets disguised as rope coils. Of course, the legalish part could evaporate the second a captain needed a scapegoat. Then Matelotage became suspicious intimacy, a disciplinary chewing toy to prove that rules were still rules, and yet crews kept doing it. Because out on the green-black edge of nowhere, belonging wasn't a luxury. It was a survival hack. If marriage on land promised a dowry, Matelotage promised a body at your back when the powder magazine coughed fire. Think of it as a joint account where the bank fees are storms and the fraud department is canon law. Number 8. Pirate democracy. Closet politics. Pirates, those chaotic HR nightmares with earrings, actually invented one of history's more honest workplace charters. Vote the captain. Vote him out. Split the loot. And don't stab your crewmates unless they truly ask for it. The discipline was harsh, but the politics were, weirdly, democratic. In that space, companionships didn't just survive, they occasionally shaped who got elected, who controlled the gun deck, and which raid got a green light. If two seasoned hands formed a reliable unit, their ticket, to use a modern word, was good for influence. Your quiet partnership could swing morale, and morale could swing a mutiny. Here's the closet politics part. Pirate crews punished sexual violence on paper because chaos is expensive, but they also needed the ship to function without constantly auditing private life. The solution? Don't ask questions that make you lose your best helmsman. Keep the code about fairness and injury, not intimacy. If a pair boosted combat efficiency, the Jolly Roger looked the other way so long as the treasure math stayed righteous. It's less rainbow flag on the foremast, and more if you two keep the cannon crew alive. I suddenly can't read. Yet democracy is moody. A hungry crew could turn pious to justify disciplining rivals. A victorious crew could turn generous to reward the bonds that worked. Companionships were political currency, risky, valuable, and occasionally counterfeit. The line between we share plunder and we share a bed was drawn in chalk on a wet deck. Everyone saw it. No one wrote it down, and waves rewrote it hourly. Pirate equality was not a pride parade. It was a ceasefire negotiated by exhaustion. Still, compared to the King's Navy with its galley of punishments, the Republic of the Masthead sometimes felt like a crooked utopia, basically democracy. But the ballot box is full of gunpowder and secrets. Number 7, ports, taverns, and 2 keys to the same room. Landfall turned sailors into economists of desire. After weeks of smelling like rope fungus and salted beef, the first luxury isn't love, it's doors. A door you can lock, a mattress that doesn't move, food that wasn't scraped off a barrel. In that brief, delirious window, bonds at sea slipped into something like domesticity. 2 men rent a room with 2 keys. They buy a cheap trunk together. They leave a note to the innkeeper. We sail on Tuesday if one of us doesn't return. Give the chest to the other. Is that romance or logistics? Yes. Ports were paradox factories. On one street, sermons and courts. On the next, taverns where a bartender knew exactly why you wanted 1 candle and 2 bowls. This was the choreography of plausible deniability. Separate stools, shared tab, separate bunks, shared blanket. He's my partner in trade, which was often perfectly true. Meanwhile, tattooists became therapists with needles. A matched symbol anchors facing each other, intertwined initials. A saint with 2 halos worth of extra meaning could hide in plain sight under the excuse of superstition. Sailors practically invented the Instagram soft launch, but every return to land risked a reset. Wages paid out, crews shuffled, jealousies ripened. The room for 2 became 1 key again, and the tavern that once served as neutral ground turned into a courtroom if a captain needed to prove his ship was morally seaworthy. The exit plan was always the ocean back to the moving village where a secret can be stowed in a coil of rope and never found again. If marriage on land meant till death do us part, partnership at sea meant till the wind changes. Romantic, maybe? Realistic? Absolutely. Basically. Victorian respectability had a curfew. Sailor intimacy had a tide table. Number 6, punishment theater. Here's the part where authority puts on its powdered wig and pretends it never sees what the ocean sees daily. Navies loved to thunder about sodomy, the catch-all legal cudgel, because it made them look righteous in front of admirals and ministers who never once slept in a hammock. The articles of war read like hellfire sermons, carved into driftwood death, lashes, ritual humiliation. And yes, there were trials terrifying, public, career-ending, but enforcement wasn't a clean blade, it was a weather vane. In battle season, captains needed speed, not spectacle, in calm season. Suddenly, someone's morality got discovered with the enthusiasm of a quartermaster finding extra rum. The theater worked. Like this whisper builds. Officers pretend they didn't hear. Performance metrics dip. A storm hits. Someone needs a villain. Cue the language of example. The crew lines up on deck. The boatswain's cats are oiled, and the ship demonstrates its virtue by tearing itself apart. Did it stop companionships? Please. It only made them smarter, quieter, better at paperwork alibis. The same captain who would execute a man on Tuesday might not notice a pair of life-saving twins on Thursday when the gun deck ran like a music box, and racism soaked into it. A black sailor or a lascar could be punished harder, faster. With less proof, a white favorite might slither off with a transfer. Empire loves a double standard. It stacks supplies on one side of the hold and punishments on the other, then calls the imbalance order. The lesson is brutal and boring. The sea is honest, the law is performative, and power always wants applause. Basically, discipline at sea was moral cosplay. Lots of costume changes, not much reality unless you were unlucky enough to be cast as the example. Number 5, letters, tokens, ghost marriages. So you can't put "I miss you." Don't drown on the muster roll. So sailors wrote it sideways. Scraps of paper folded into tobacco tins. Names scratched inside a pewter mug. A button traded like a ring. If Matelotage was the contract, tokens were the vows tiny. Durable proofs that you belonged to someone when the ship pretended you belonged to everyone. And then there were the wills. Oh, the wills. Nothing says legal love letter like, in the event of my drowning, the contents of my chest, my wages, and my spare boots go to well. You know who? Sometimes a shipmate fell overboard and the survivor became a one-man shrine. He'd keep the knife sharp, polish the mug, pass along the story that softened the ending. He fought the wave. He laughed at the last. There were also the living rituals rotating who took the middle watch, sharing the sweeter water from the top of the cask, sewing an extra thick seam in the partner's jacket. Care, disguised as superstition. Love, disguised as logistics. And in port, a clerk might accidentally notarize a partnership that was about property, two men buying tools together. Two names on a lease because property is the closet's oldest prop. A cynic says it's just practical. A romantic says it's ceremony with splinters. Both are right. On land, you had church bells. At sea, you had a stamped chit and a knife mark only 2 people could read. The paperwork didn't say forever. It said until the ship breaks us, which is more honest than most vows anyway. Basically, sailors invented the soft launch and the prenup, then hid both in a tin of shag tobacco. Number 4, race lines, real lines. Empire packed ships with people who didn't speak the same language but had the same enemy. Hunger, weather, boredom, the occasional cannonball. Black sailors, indigenous pilots, South Asian lascars, freedmen, press-ganged farm boys. The deck was a messy democracy with a whip. Did companionship cross race lines? Of course. Survival is multilingual. A hammock for 2 doesn't ask where your grandmother was born. But the power grid above it made the risks wildly uneven. A white sailor's joke could be a black sailor's court-martial. A rumor that barely singed one man could burn another to the waterline. And still, there are stories, quiet as tide marks of men who defied the ledger. Shared wages, shared blankets, shared tattoos. A pair that worked the rigging like one body. And the ship kept them together because efficiency beats prejudice when the mast is whining. In port, though, the empire returned with its tall hat and short patience. Courts swung heavier on men of color. Clerks suddenly couldn't remember who witnessed which will. The same captain who praised a lascar's seamanship might freeze him out of any innocent alibi that saved a white favorite. This isn't a cute, love conquers all montage. It's a ledger of risk. Companionships across race lines existed, thrived, and saved lives, but they paid a surcharge to the empire's racism every single day. The miracle isn't that they happened, it's that some survived paper, rumor, and tide. If the ocean is a great equalizer, bureaucracy is a great unequalizer, stamping differences back into people as soon as the gangplank touches the key. Basically, the heart can cross any line. The payroll officer cannot. Number 3. Science, superstition, and shared beds. You know how you Google symptoms, and suddenly you're dying. Sailors did that with superstition. If you sleep alone, the cold will sink into your bones. If you share a bed, your breath will keep the damp off. Not science unless you count body heat as the world's oldest technology. In a floating freezer with drafts in the floorboards, sharing a blanket wasn't just cozy, it was clinical trial data with better storytelling. And because men at sea lived on rituals, whistle twice at dawn. Never name a boat after a cat folding companionship into superstition made it look sensible. We bunked together for warmth, said the grin that meant many things. There's a delicious hypocrisy here. Captains quoted medical manuals about ventilation and morality. But the surgeon's best tool was still a hot brick and someone who'd make you drink water. 2 bodies under one blanket meant fewer coughs, faster healing, better odds after the knife scraped a splinter. Was it cover? Sure. Was it care? Absolutely. You can hide a lot inside the phrase, health of the crew. The blanket became a pharmacy, the hammock a clinic, and the whispered promise, wake me if the fever spikes a prescription no quartermaster could ration. The sea made everything double-coated. A shared cup was hygiene. A shared shirt was thrift. A shared bed was preventing miasma, which is doctor speak for leave us alone. The irony, when storms blew and everyone slept in a dog pile by the guns. Morality took a nap too. Proximity is a prankster. Once you accept bodies as survival gear, the line between logistics and love goes soft as worn canvas. Basically, sailor medicine was a Venn diagram where science, superstition, and affection hugged in the middle and refused to let go. Number 2, confession by lantern light. The ocean keeps secrets, but storms shake them out. Picture a night so black, the stars look like nail holes in the sky. You and your person lash yourselves to a pin rail, hands raw from reefing, and somewhere between a snapped yard and a swallowed prayer, the truth tumbles out. If I go, take the knife. If I go, tell the story. Men who could face a broadside without blinking suddenly choked on the quiet fact that they belong to each other, not in a ballad way, in an inventory way, a blood and salt way. Confession at sea wasn't a church booth. It was triage. You share fear in small, precise doses, a pocket flask of courage. Don't let them write me wrong, someone says, and that becomes the job description of love editor, witness, accountant of the soul, later, in the hold. A lantern makes a circle of weak gold, and you divide biscuits with the care of a sacrament. No ring, no priest, just oaths calibrated to weather reports. Promises were measured in knots and leagues. Keep me warm, keep me honest, keep me from disappearing into rumor, and when dawn comes, it's back to jokes and chores. The deck needs loud men who pretend they don't bruise. The heart needs quiet men who know exactly where the bruises are. So the language flips, jabs become code. Insults become insurance. A thrown rag is basically a bouquet if you know the choreography. The ocean writes truth in pencil. Then waves erase half the sentence. The rest you memorize. Basically, sailor love letters were spoken at Volume 2 while the ship screamed at Volume 10. And somehow, the message still landed. Number 1. After the last voyage. What happens when the anchor bites home for the final time? Some partnerships dissolved on the dock like foam paid out, hugged once, turned into folklore. Others went inland and invented a grammar. 2 cousins who kept house. 2 business partners who opened a chandlery and bickered over nails like an old married scandal. The closet on land had solid doors, so men built peepholes called plausible deniability, a joint savings box, a will for services rendered, a grave plot with just enough space for a coincidence. The same town that tutted at sailor rumors also loved reliable shopkeepers. And reliability is a love language with receipts. The past doesn't give us many postcards, just a receipt here, a testimony there, a letter that survives the laundry of time. But look closely at the margins, and you'll find them tiny, bureaucratic miracles that let 2 lives interlock. A landlady who accepted 2 keys without commentary, a clerk who didn't split hairs on a joint purchase, a neighbor who brought soup and never asked about the extra chair. History tends to write the parade kings, battles, flags. These men lived in the side streets, where the marching band sounds like a rumor. And yet the sea followed them. They flinched at sudden wind, mended each other's coats with ship-shaped stitches, woke at odd hours to check locks as if they were hatches. The oath remained, "Don't let me be misfiled. Tell the good version." If companionship at sea was a survival pact, companionship on land was a slow, stubborn choosing. Basically, after the last voyage, love became a business plan the city clerks accidentally approved, and maybe that's the happiest ending the century could afford. If there's a moral hiding in the bilge water, it's this: people make rules, but loneliness makes counter-rules, and the ocean collects both, like driftwood. Power tried to police bodies, weather laughed. Racism and rank stacked the deck. Survival and stubborn affection reshuffled it. We're not as modern as we think. Today we've just traded hammocks for studio apartments and lantern light confessions for text messages that say home safe. The need is the same: someone to split the hard days, someone to witness the story, someone to make sure the ledger spells your name right. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.